Hi, everyone. My name is Bryan G from Keller Williams, and today I would like to talk about the earnest money deposit, or EMD for short. So, on its very basic level, the EMD represents the buyer's good faith and also serves as legal consideration for a binding contract. That's its very basic definition. However, it does serve several different functions and also represents several different values to the seller. So, I guess the first question would be how much would be a typical earnest money deposit amount? In a non competitive situation, in a balanced, normal market, we would like to see at least 1%. So if you're selling a house for 300,000, you would like to see an EMD come in at 3,000, right? Now, and here's one of those value judgments that we make. That's average, right? Now, it doesn't have to be 1%, it can be lower. But we typically, from a selling standpoint, we do like to see a stronger EMD. If we're selling a house at 300,000 and somebody comes in with a $10,000 earnest money deposit, that's very strong for us. We like to see that. And the reason for that is that it shows that the buyer does have good cash on hand. They might still be financing, but it does show that they appear to be, based upon their earnest money amounts, to be strong buyers, and we do like to see that. And that does come into play later in the transaction, which we'll get to in a minute. So when an offer is negotiated and earnest money is brought in by the agent after the offer is accepted, where does it go? Well, the EMD is held in escrow by the broker or the title company and held until closing. Now, um, another function of the earnest money is to compensate the seller if for some reason the buyer walks away from the transaction for a not good reason. This goes back to why we like to see a nice, strong earnest money deposit, because that's motivation, right? For someone to not walk away from a transaction. If they have, again, a $10,000 EMD on a $300,000 house, that's going to be pretty hard for that buyer to walk away from that transaction because they don't want to lose their money, right? They don't want to lose that earnest money. So let me give a couple scenarios to kind of help define that, just to kind of, demonstrate that. So you negotiate the offer and we have the home inspection. Let's say that there's something, really bad with the house, something catastrophic. It has a failing foundation or something, and the buyer wants out from home inspection. The buyer still keeps their EMD, or they get that back, right? Um, if we have an appraisal that's wildly off and we cannot negotiate the gap between appraisal value and sale value and the deal falls apart, the buyer still gets their EMD back. Okay. Another scenario would be is, um, oh, let's say that the buyer loses their financing. We've seen this a lot during COVID, you know, where you have a husband and wife are both on the loan, and one of the spouses gets furloughed, and the underwriters can no longer support the financing, and the financing falls through, and the deal falls through. The buyer still keeps their earnest money, okay, or they get that back. Now, what's the scenario where the seller would keep that earnest money? Quite simply, where we're past home inspection, we're past appraisal, everything's going just fine. 3 days before closing, the buyer just throws up their hands and says, "We're out. We change our mind. We're leaving." Now the seller is going to keep that earnest money, right? Because that is a non-justifiable reason. Okay. Now, these are just a few basic scenarios. There's all kinds of nuance, right? Every situation is different, right? Every situation is unique. But these are some really basic guidelines that we go by. So, um, so once again, the earnest money is very important because it's not only a show of good faith from the buyer, but also is a deterrent from the buyer to walk away from the transaction, and also demonstrates the strength or the weakness or possible weakness of a buyer. So this is just a really basic rundown on earnest money deposit. Like I said, each situation is unique. And if you have any other questions, we can definitely talk about that. But that's the basic function of earnest money deposit. Thank you so much.